The phone call came at 2:47 in the morning. Thomas hadn't heard that voice in 15 years. It was shaking. "They're going to bury it," the voice said. "Everything I saw, everything I kept silent about." Thomas sat up in bed, heart pounding. He recognized the voice immediately. Robert Finch, former royal guard. The man who had stood outside locked doors, who had walked behind princesses, who had seen things that never made it into any newspaper. "What are you talking about?" Thomas asked. "Meet me," Robert said. "Tomorrow. The old pub near Kensington." "I'm dying, Thomas. Cancer. 6 months, maybe less. And I can't take it to my grave." The line went dead. Thomas stared at his phone in the darkness. He'd been a journalist for 20 years. He'd covered royal stories, scandals, celebrations. But he'd never heard Robert sound like that. Desperate, terrified, free. The next afternoon, Thomas walked into the quiet pub. Robert sat in the corner booth, thinner than Thomas remembered. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted his tea. "I need you to listen," Robert said. "And I need you to believe me. Because what I'm about to tell you changes everything people think they know about Charles, Diana, and Camilla." Thomas leaned forward. "If you want to hear stories like this that reveal the truth behind the headlines, hit that subscribe button now. You won't regret it." Robert took a breath. It was October 1986. I'd been assigned to the Royal Detail for 3 years. Professional, invisible. That's what we were trained to be. We saw everything and said nothing. He paused, his eyes distant. That night, there was a private dinner at Highgrove. Just Charles and Camilla. Diana was in London with the boys. I was stationed in the East Corridor. Close enough to hear if something went wrong. Far enough to give them privacy. "What happened?" Thomas asked. "I heard her crying," Robert said quietly. "Not Camilla, Diana. She'd come back early. Unannounced. She was standing in the hallway, just outside the dining room. I saw her through the corridor mirror." Thomas felt his pulse quicken. She wasn't supposed to be there. No one knew she was coming. And she was listening to them talk. Charles and Camilla, laughing, speaking in those little private voices people use when they're truly comfortable with each other. Robert's jaw tightened. Diana stood there for maybe 2 minutes, frozen. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't. I wasn't supposed to exist. "Then what?" Thomas whispered. "She turned and looked directly at me," Robert said. Her face was completely pale, tears running down her cheeks. But she didn't make a sound. She just put one finger to her lips, asking me to stay silent. Thomas felt a chill run through him. She walked away. Didn't confront them. Didn't storm in. Just walked back out into the night like a ghost. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Thomas asked. Robert looked down at his tea. "Because the next morning, I was called into a private office. A man I'd never seen before told me that if I ever spoke about what I'd seen, I'd lose everything. My job, my pension, my reputation." He met Thomas's eyes. "But that wasn't the worst part." Thomas waited. "The worst part was what happened 3 weeks later. And that's when I realized Camilla wasn't just the other woman. She was the one pulling strings no one could see." Robert ordered another tea. His hands were steadier now, as if telling the story was releasing something he'd held too long. 3 weeks after that night, he continued, Diana requested a new security rotation. She wanted different guards, people she'd never worked with before. "Why?" Thomas asked. "She was testing everyone," Robert said, trying to figure out who she could trust, who was reporting back to Charles, who was loyal to the palace and not to her. He stared out the window at the gray London street. I was reassigned to perimeter duty. Farther away, less access. It looked like a normal rotation, but I knew what it really was. I'd seen too much. Robert leaned closer. "But during those 3 weeks, before I was moved, I saw something else. Something that made me understand how deep this went." Thomas pulled out his notebook. Robert glanced at it, then nodded slowly. "There were phone calls," Robert said. "Late at night, coming into a private line at Kensington Palace. It's always around 11. Always when Charles wasn't there. Camilla, Thomas asked. No, Robert said. To Camilla? From Diana. Thomas blinked. Wait, Diana was calling Camilla. Twice that I know of, Robert said. I wasn't listening, but I was near the room. I could hear Diana's voice. Calm, cold, controlled. He took a sip of tea. The first time, Diana spoke for maybe 5 minutes. Her voice never rose, never cracked. When she hung up, she sat in silence for a long time. Then she called her private secretary and said something I'll never forget. What? She said she thinks she's won? Let her think that. Thomas felt his skin prickle. What did that mean? He asked. Robert shook his head. I didn't know then. But 2 days later, a story appeared in the press. Small piece, nothing dramatic. It was about Camilla attending a charity event. She'd worn the wrong dress, wrong tone for the occasion. The press tore her apart. Coincidence? Thomas asked. That's what I thought, Robert said, until it happened again. He folded his hands on the table. The second call was 4 days later. Same time, same cold voice. This time, Diana hung up after just 2 minutes. The next morning, Charles had a meeting with his private office. I wasn't in the room, but I saw him afterward. He looked rattled. What happened in the meeting? Thomas asked. He'd been told that certain financial records were being reviewed. Personal accounts, gifts, transactions that weren't exactly public knowledge. Robert's eyes were sharp now. Anna was building a file. Quietly, carefully. She was documenting everything. Phone records, meetings, money. She knew she couldn't fight them head on. So she was gathering weapons. Thomas scribbled notes quickly. Did Camilla know? He asked. Oh, she knew, Robert said. And that's when things got dangerous. He paused, his face darkening. A week after that second phone call, I was doing a routine sweep of the grounds at Kensington. It was early morning. It's barely light. I saw a car I didn't recognize parked near the side gate. Whose car? I ran the plates later, Robert said. It was registered to a private security firm, the kind that doesn't ask questions. Thomas felt his stomach tighten. I watched for a few minutes. A man got out, mid-50s, suit, briefcase. He didn't go to the main entrance. He went to a service door. Someone let him in. Who? I never found out, Robert said. But 30 minutes later, he left. And that afternoon, Diana's head of security was replaced. Just like that. It's just like that, Robert said. No explanation, no announcement. He was just gone. Robert's voice dropped lower. I saw him 2 months later, by accident, at a train station. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. Did you talk to him? Thomas asked. I tried, Robert said. He looked at me like I was a stranger. Told me to walk away. Told me if I valued my life, I'd forget I ever worked there. Thomas stopped writing. What did he mean? He whispered. Robert met his eyes. He meant that Camilla had more protection than just Charles. She had people in places Diana never expected. And those people were willing to do whatever it took to make sure Camilla stayed exactly where she was. Thomas ordered coffee. His hand was shaking slightly. Robert noticed, but said nothing. You need to understand something, Robert said. Camilla wasn't just a mistress. She was strategic, patient. She'd been in Charles's life longer than Diana ever was. He traced a finger along the rim of his cup. Before Diana, there was Camilla. During Diana, there was Camilla. And Camilla knew that after Diana, there would still be Camilla. How did she manage it? Thomas asked. She never demanded, Robert said. She never made scenes. She was the calm in Charles's storm. While Diana was emotional, unpredictable, Camilla was steady, reliable. She gave him exactly what he needed, which was someone who didn't need him to be anything other than what he was, Robert said. Diana wanted him to be a better husband, a better father, better man. Camilla just wanted him. Robert's voice carried something like sadness. I saw them together once. Charles and Camilla. This was in 1987, maybe early 88. I was assigned to a country estate for a weekend. Private gathering. Very few staff. What were they like? Thomas asked. Ordinary, Robert said. That's what struck me. weren't sneaking around. They weren't dramatic. They were just comfortable, like an old married couple. He shook his head slowly. Charles laughed with her. Real laughs. It's the kind I never heard when he was with Diana. That must have been hard to watch, Thomas said. It was, Robert admitted. Because I liked Diana. Everyone did. She was kind to the staff. Remembered birthdays. Asked about families. She treated us like people. His eyes hardened. But kindness doesn't win wars. And that's what this was. A war. Robert leaned back. In early 1989, things escalated. Diana stopped being careful. She started making public appearances that seemed designed to outshine Charles. Bigger smiles, better clothes, more charity work. The press loved her, Thomas said. Exactly, Robert said. Because the palace runs on control. Image. Predictability. Diana was none of those things. He paused. That's when Camilla made her move. What move? Thomas asked. She convinced Charles to create distance, Robert said. It's not physical distance, emotional distance. She helped him build a wall between himself and Diana, made him see Diana as unstable. Irrational. How do you know this? Because I heard her, Robert said. One night I was stationed outside a private sitting room at Highgrove. They were talking. Charles was upset about something Diana had done, some interview she'd given. Robert's voice took on a softer tone, mimicking. Camilla said, Darling, she's unwell. You can see it. The press can see it. Everyone can see it but you. She told him he needed to protect himself. Protect the boys. Thomas felt sick. She was planting seeds, Robert said, making Diana the villain, the unstable one. The problem that needed to be managed. Did it work? Thomas asked. Look at history, Robert said. Look at how the story was told. Diana was called paranoid, jealous, unstable, and some of that was true. But it was also true because they made it true. He finished his tea. By 1990, Diana knew she was losing. She couldn't compete with someone who had 20 years of history with Charles. Someone who knew him better than she ever could. So what did she do? Thomas asked. Robert smiled grimly. She stopped trying to win Charles back. She started trying to win the world. Thomas nodded slowly. The interviews, the charities, the public image. Exactly, Robert said. If she couldn't be the wife Charles wanted, she'd be the princess the world needed. And it worked. By 1992, she was the most photographed woman on earth. But Camilla was still there, Thomas said. Always, Robert said. Quiet, patient, waiting. He looked directly at Thomas. In 1992, the separation was announced. Diana had won the public, but Camilla had won, Charles. And in the end, that's what mattered. Robert's voice dropped. But there's something nobody knows. Something that happened right before the separation. Something that still haunts me. Thomas leaned forward. What? Diana came to me, Robert said quietly. It was late November. Cold night. She found me on duty near the gardens. She wasn't supposed to talk to guards directly, but she did. What did she say? Robert's eyes glistened. She asked me if I believed in justice. I didn't know how to answer. She smiled. Sad smile. Then she said, Neither do I, not anymore. Thomas felt his throat tighten. Then she walked away, Robert said. But before she did, she turned back and said something I didn't understand until much later. What? She said. They think they've won? But I've made sure the truth will come out. Maybe not now. Maybe not for years. But it will come out. Thomas's coffee had gone cold. He hadn't touched it in 20 minutes. What did she mean? He asked. The truth coming out? Robert rubbed his face, exhaustion showing through. I didn't know then, he said. But in 1995, everything became clear. The Panorama interview, Thomas said. Yes, Robert said. But not just that. What people don't know is what happened before that interview. He shifted in his seat. Was no longer on close detail by then. I'd been moved to administrative security. Desk work. They thought I was safely out of the way. But, Thomas prompted, but I still had access to certain reports. Security logs. Communications records. And in the months before that interview, something strange was happening. Robert pulled out a worn notebook from his jacket, flipped through pages filled with dates and times. Diana was meeting with people, journalists, legal advisors, people from outside the usual palace circle. Every meeting was carefully documented in our logs. That's normal for security, isn't it? Thomas asked. Yes, Robert said. But these logs were being copied. Sent somewhere else? Someone was tracking every single person Diana spoke to. Thomas felt cold. Who? I never found out for certain, Robert said. But the requests came through channels connected to Charles's office. He tapped the notebook. 3 weeks before the Panorama interview aired, there was a security briefing. Very quiet. Very small group. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I was covering for someone. What was it about? Damage control, Robert said. They knew the interview was coming. Not the details. But they knew Diana was going to speak publicly about the marriage. Robert's voice hardened. And they had a plan. Thomas waited. The plan was to discredit her, Robert said simply. Before the interview even aired, they were preparing statements, talking points. They were going to paint her as mentally unstable, unreliable, a woman scorned who couldn't be trusted. Did they know what she was going to say? Thomas asked. No, Robert said, but it didn't matter. Whatever she said, they were ready to tear it apart. He closed the notebook. Then the interview happened, and everything changed. Thomas remembered that night. The whole world had watched. There were 3 of us in this marriage, Robert quoted quietly. That's what she said. And suddenly, everything was out in the open. How did Camilla react? Thomas asked. Robert smiled without humor, publicly. She disappeared. Went completely silent. No statements. No appearances. She became invisible. And privately. That's where it gets interesting, Robert said. 2 days after the interview, I was asked to accompany a senior officer to deliver documents to a private address. I didn't know whose address until we arrived, Camilla's. Thomas guessed. Robert nodded. She answered the door herself. No staff, no security visible. She looked tired, but not defeated. He paused. She took the documents. Thanked us, professional.com. But as we were leaving, I heard her on the phone. The door hadn't fully closed. What did she say? She said, it doesn't matter what she told them. Time is on our side. It always has been. Thomas felt his pulse quicken. What did that mean? It meant Camilla understood something Diana didn't, Robert said. The public loved Diana, but the institution loved continuity, stability, tradition. He leaned forward. Camilla knew she just had to wait. Let the storm pass. Let Diana be the headline. Because headlines fade, but she and Charles, they were forever. That's cold, Thomas said. That's survival, Robert corrected. Camilla had been the other woman for decades. She'd endured humiliation, scandal, hatred. She wasn't going to let one interview destroy what she'd built. Robert's expression darkened. But Diana wasn't finished. In 1996, the divorce happened. Diana got her settlement. Her title changed. She was no longer Her Royal Highness. I remember, Thomas said, people were furious. Diana was devastated, Robert said quietly. But she was also free. For the first time in 15 years, she could live her own life. Did she? Thomas asked. Robert looked away. For a while. She dated, traveled, did her charity work. The world still loved her, still followed her every move. His voice dropped, and that terrified them. Them, Thomas asked. The palace, Charles, Camilla, because Diana, free and independent, was more powerful than Diana trapped in a marriage. She could say anything, do anything, and people would listen. Robert's hands clenched. In early 1997, something shifted. Diana started making plans. Big plans. What kind of plans? She was going to marry Dodi Fade, Robert said. or at least that's what the rumors said. She was also talking about moving, spending more time abroad, away from England. Thomas nodded slowly. And if she'd done that, she would have been untouchable. Robert finished. The palace would have no control over her, no influence. She'd be a princess in exile, loved by millions, saying whatever she wanted. He met Thomas's eyes. 3 weeks later, she was dead. The pub had grown quieter. Outside, the afternoon was fading into evening. Robert looked older in the dimming light. "I'm not saying what people think I'm saying," he said carefully. "I'm not a conspiracy theorist." "But," Thomas asked. "But I saw things after her death that didn't make sense," Robert said. "Security protocols that were broken. Communications that were delayed. Reports that went missing." He rubbed his temples. "The night of the crash, I wasn't on duty. I was home. I saw it on the news like everyone else. And I felt sick. Because 3 days earlier, there had been a briefing," Robert said, "about Diana's security in Paris, about gaps in coverage, about risks." Thomas stopped breathing. "What kind of risks?" "The usual," Robert said. "Paparazzi. Crowds. Traffic." But the briefing ended with something unusual. A senior officer said, "If something happens, we respond according to protocol. Nothing more. Nothing less." "That sounds normal," Thomas said. "It was how he said it," Robert replied, like he was reminding everyone not to do too much, not to go beyond what was required. He shook his head. "When the news broke, I waited for the response. The investigation. The questions. They came. But they felt controlled. Managed." "What do you mean?" "I mean, certain people were interviewed. Others weren't. Certain evidence was examined. Other evidence wasn't. It was like watching a play where everyone knew their lines." Robert's voice cracked slightly. And 6 weeks after Diana died, Camilla made her first public appearance with Charles. Thomas looked up sharply. 6 weeks. 6 weeks, Robert confirmed. A birthday party. Private event. But the press found out. Photos were taken. And suddenly, there they were. Together. Official. No longer hiding. People were outraged, Thomas said. For a while, Robert said, but outrage fades. Time passed. Charles and Camilla kept appearing together. Slowly, carefully, each appearance a little more public than the last. He smiled bitterly. By 2005, they were married. Camilla became the Duchess of Cornwall. Everything she'd waited for. Everything Diana had tried to prevent. How do you live with that? Thomas asked quietly. Knowing what you know. Robert was silent for a long moment. I told myself it was fate, he said. That Diana's death was a tragic accident. That Charles and Camilla were always meant to be together. Do you still believe that? I don't know what I believe, Robert said. But I know what I saw. And I know that in the months after Diana died, there was relief in certain circles. Not grief. Relief. He pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket, slid it across the table. What's this? Thomas asked. List, Robert said. People who were in key positions during Diana's time, people who are now in very comfortable retirements, very well-paid retirements. Thomas unfolded the paper, scanned the names. What am I supposed to do with this? Whatever you want, Robert said. But if you dig into those names, you'll find something interesting. They all benefited. Financially, professionally. After everything was over, Thomas felt his stomach turn. Are you saying I'm not saying anything? Robert interrupted. I'm just a dying man sharing observations. He stood up slowly, gathering his coat. Oh. But I'll tell you what I really think about Camilla, he said. I think she's the most patient person I've ever seen. She waited 30 years to get what she wanted. Through scandal, through Diana, through death, his eyes were hard. She never wavered, never broke, never gave up. And now, she's queen consort. Standing beside Charles, everything Diana was supposed to be. Do you think she planned it? Thomas asked. Robert buttoned his coat. I think she understood something fundamental, he said. She understood that if you wait long enough, if you're patient enough, if you never give anyone a reason to push you away completely, eventually you become inevitable. He put a hand on Thomas's shoulder. Diana tried to fight with passion, with truth, with love. But Camilla fought with time, and time always wins. Robert walked toward the door, then stopped. One more thing, he said. In 2002, I was at an event. Small gathering. I saw Camilla from a distance. She was talking to someone, laughing, and for just a second she looked toward where I was standing. Did she recognize you? I don't know, Robert said, but I'll never forget her expression. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't guilt. It was just complete certainty, like she'd always known exactly how everything would end. He opened the door. Publish what you want. Believe what you want. But remember this, the story everyone knows about Charles, Diana, and Camilla. That's just the version they let you see, and the real version. Thomas called after him. Robert turned one last time. The real version is that Camilla changed everything, not through drama, not through confrontation, but through simply refusing to disappear. And maybe that's the most powerful thing anyone can do. Thomas sat alone in the pub for another hour. The list of names sat on the table in front of him. His notebook filled with details he wasn't sure he could ever publish. He thought about calling Robert, asking more questions, getting clearer answers. But he knew Robert had said everything he was going to say. Over the next 3 weeks, Thomas did what journalists do. He investigated. He made calls. He searched records. And slowly, quietly, a pattern emerged. The names on Robert's list weren't random. They were people who'd been present at crucial moments. Security officers who'd overseen Diana's protection, palace staff who'd managed communications, legal advisors who'd handled sensitive negotiations, and every single one of them had prospered after Diana's death. One had become head of security for a major corporation, salary 8 times what he'd made in royal service. Another had been given a position in a prestigious law firm. No explanation for how someone from palace service had made that jump. A third had retired to a countryside estate worth millions. On a guard's pension, Thomas couldn't prove anything, but the pattern was undeniable. He tried to get interviews. Most declined. One agreed to meet, then canceled at the last minute. Another threatened legal action if Thomas continued asking questions. The silence was louder than any confession. 6 weeks after meeting Robert, Thomas received a call from a hospital. Robert had passed away peacefully in his sleep. The funeral was small. Thomas attended. Charles sent flowers. A tasteful arrangement with a card that read simply, "With gratitude for your service." Camilla's name wasn't on the card, but Thomas wondered if she knew. If she'd heard that Robert had finally talked. If she cared. Standing at the graveside, Thomas thought about everything Robert had told him. About Diana standing in that hallway, crying silently. About Camilla's patience. About the phone calls and the threats and the convenient retirements. He thought about how history gets written by the people who survive. After the funeral, an older woman approached him. She'd been sitting in the back during the service. "You're the journalist," she said. "Robert told me he spoke to you. You knew him well?" Thomas asked. "How was his sister?" she said. "He didn't have many people at the end. Just me." She handed Thomas an envelope. "He wanted you to have this. Said to open it only if you decided to write the story." Thomas took the envelope. It was sealed. "Heavy? Did he tell you what's inside?" He asked. "No," she said. "But he told me that Camilla isn't the villain people think she is. And she isn't the victim either. She's just someone who understood the game better than everyone else." The woman smiled sadly. "Robert said Diana was the one people loved. But Camilla was the one who understood power. And love doesn't always beat power." She walked away, leaving Thomas holding the envelope. That night, alone in his flat, Thomas opened it. Inside were photographs. Old ones faded. Some from the 1970s. Charles and Camilla, young and laughing. Before Diana, before everything, there were also letters, copies, not originals. Letters between Charles and Camilla spanning decades. Nothing scandalous. Nothing shocking. Just consistent, steady communication. Proof that she'd always been there. And at the bottom of the envelope, single note in Robert's handwriting. This isn't evidence of conspiracy. This is evidence of inevitability. Camilla didn't destroy Diana's marriage. The marriage was broken from the start because Charles never stopped loving Camilla. Diana never had a chance. Not because she wasn't good enough, but because she was trying to win a man who'd already given his heart away decades before she arrived. That's the real tragedy. Not betrayal, but impossible love. Thomas read the note 3 times. He thought about publishing everything. The interviews, the evidence, the theories. But what would it prove? That powerful people protect their interests? That love is complicated. That sometimes patience wins. He thought about Diana, standing in that corridor, finger to her lips, asking for silence. He thought about Camilla, waiting 30 years, never giving up. He thought about Charles, caught between duty and desire, and he realized something Robert had been trying to tell him all along. This wasn't a story about good and evil. It wasn't about heroes and villains. It was a story about 3 people trapped in a system bigger than all of them. Diana fought the system and lost. Camilla worked within the system and won. Charles simply existed in it, trying to keep everyone happy and failing. The truth wasn't shocking. It was sad. In the end, Thomas wrote the story, but not the one people expected. He didn't expose conspiracies. He didn't accuse anyone of crimes. He wrote about a guard who saw the human side of royal tragedy. About a princess who loved too openly. About a woman who loved too patiently. About a prince who couldn't choose. The article was published in a small magazine. It got some attention, a few comments. Then it faded into the vast archive of royal coverage. Camilla never responded. Charles never commented. The palace said nothing, and life continued today. Camilla stands beside Charles as he reigns as king. She's queen consort, just as she always knew she would be. The public has softened toward her. Time has done its work. Diana remains beloved in death, frozen forever as the people's princess. Perfect and tragic. And somewhere in between those 2 legacies lies the truth. Robert tried to share that Camilla changed everything not through scandal or scheme, but through something far simpler and far more powerful. She simply refused to leave. She loved steadily when Diana loved passionately. She waited quietly when Diana fought loudly. She played the long game when Diana demanded immediate victory. And in the end, the long game won. Not because it was right, not because it was fair, but because that's how power works. That's how institutions survive. That's how history gets written. Diana changed hearts, but Camilla changed everything. That's the truth a royal guard saw. That's the story he died to tell, and now you know it too.